Our program guest this morning is the Treasurer and Deputy Prime Minister Wayne Swan. He'll join us from Brisbane. But first, with the help of the panel, we'll check out the Sunday papers around the country. And guess what? Kevin Rudd is still on page one, and he was once a double agent, David Marr.
Yes, the Sunday Telegraph reports, quoting Alexander Downer, "We used him mercilessly," says Downer, "to embarrass Laurie Brereton, who was at the time, and I might say that time was over a decade ago, who was at that time the Foreign Affairs spokesman for the opposition. We would give Rudd information to use against Brereton, and he would use it." Now, from his hospital bed in Brisbane, Kevin Rudd is considering a defamation suit. From somewhere abroad, Alexander Downer is questioning the interpretation that this made Kevin Rudd a double agent of the government.
So he's not denying the quotes, but he is denying the interpretation of the quotes.
Doesn't make him a double agent, perhaps just a single agent, I don't know. But two things need to be noted here. One is, Rudd clawed his way to the top of the Labor Party with remarkable ferocity, which is one of the reasons why he has so few friends in caucus. The other is that these two men, Rudd and Downer, have been vicious opponents of each other since they were in Foreign Affairs together as kids back in the early 1980s. Don't forget, Alexander Downer is the man that Kevin Rudd tore to shreds in the AWB inquiry. No love lost between them. Here's a 10-year-old story, front page in the elections.
So what's the politics of it, Lenore, in the middle of a campaign? Is it damaging to Labor?
Well, of course it's damaging to Labor because Labor's got a big announcement today and it's going to get muddied again by more speculation, leaks, talk about Kevin Rudd, just like the whole last week, which has got to go down as one of the most disastrous weeks in a campaign that I can remember. I mean, it was disastrous for Labor. They had a shocking week, and this kind of thing just makes it keep on going.
I think there's an interesting point here. When Kevin Rudd gets out of hospital, having had his gallbladder removed, and perhaps some of the bitterness leaves this campaign, what is Labor going to do with him? Because they will have to find somebody to scapegoat for these leaks before Kevin can actually be a useful tool for the remaining 3 weeks of this campaign.
I think it was interesting that Therese Rain was saying yesterday she was advising her husband to take all the time clinically advised to get better.
Well, I think that that's a very wise counsel.
And she did say that would be at least 2 weeks and there's 3 weeks to go.
Well, I also thought it was interesting comparing the two statements that came out, one from Julia Gillard on Friday saying that he was welcome to campaign in the seat of Griffith, where she hoped that he would focus his attention, but the one from Kevin saying that he was looking forward to campaigning in Griffith and beyond the borders of Griffith.
The problem for the Labor Party is that it doesn't matter what Rudd does. He doesn't have to leak. He doesn't have to have a gallbladder operation. He doesn't have to be accused of these, old stories on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. He is the most interesting person in this election campaign. He's much more interesting than Gillard and Abbott.
And Lenore, when you say it was a disastrous week, I would have thought that if you look back after a 5-week campaign and say, well, that past week was just a week in the campaign, then that's one thing. But if you were to look back after 5 weeks and say, no, that was typical of the campaign generally, they'd be in real trouble, wouldn't they?
Well, the coalition didn't do so well in the first week of the campaign, but by polling day most people will have forgotten the first week of the campaign and forgotten why it was that the coalition didn't do so well. This week people will remember this kind of disunity, this kind of chaos, people remember, and it's starting to change the momentum of the campaign quite dramatically. Now, if the Labor Party can't turn that around this week, then they're in diabolical trouble.
All right, well, now the next instalment might be the so-called Abbott dirt file that's referred to in the newspapers this morning, Piers.
Well, the Sunday Age's Josh Gordon has a report with Tom Arup, saying that Labor has a massive portfolio of documents, old quotes from Abbott, which they will pour out and use to smear him.
So that's not really dirt, is it? Quotes, your own quotes.
Well,
I
think that's what politics is about, playing people back, as the opposition's been doing very successfully against Gillard. But the opposition did try to inoculate itself against this sort of attack by announcing at the onset of this campaign that there would be a smear. This would be the dirtiest campaign ever, and I think that when Labor starts to play these quotes back, a lot of the electorate will say, oh, this is what they were talking about, this is what we expected. It depends on exactly how virulent that they can...
Yeah, but then again, like Laurie Oakes' interview with Tony Abbott this morning was all about the weather vane, and he just took quotes from the past and pointed out how he'd constantly changed his mind on so many issues. Now, that's not dirt, is it?
I think that's
what you would expect.
I mean, I have a pile this high on the side of my desk of partial quotes brought in by both sides of politics trying to discredit the other side of politics. And I think that's really perfectly fair play, to be honest. There are other sort of smear campaigns like Going the Partner, which the Sunday Telegraph today is running a story about Tim Matheson, Julia Gillard's partner, and a drink driving charge in 2003 where he was 4 times the legal blood alcohol limit. Now, you know, I think it's fair that partners or spouses come under a certain degree of scrutiny, but I think really going the spouse is much closer to the borderline of smear than simply raising things that either leader may have said in the past.
Yeah, and yet the political parties aren't driving this. To be fair, the media needs no encouragement to go to this area.
Well, I think that the other thing I find interesting about this is that in about 3 or 4 occasions in these stories, they make the point that he would be the first de facto to live in the lodge. So that's clearly part of the scrutiny of Tim Matheson also is that they're not married, this not married issue.
Just before we hear from you on this, David, these questions are coming up constantly, and what we're hearing here is something that I think was put to Julie Gillard almost every day during the past week.
We haven't seen Tim out on the campaign trail. Where is he?
He is not a Labor Party official or a candidate or a minister, so you won't see him out on the campaign trail in that sense.
Will you be happy to be the first de facto couple living in the lodge, or are we to expect a prime ministerial wedding?
Would your partner move into the lodge, for example?
Oh, yes, Tim and I live together,
yes.
So yes, wherever I live, he'll live.
David?
Well, I think it's a little kind to the coalition to say that they're not involved in this. Of course they are. They've been trying to find a way of bringing in the marriage issue and bringing in the atheism issue without it blowing back on them. And Tony Abbott's been terrific in public. He's been saying, you know, these aren't issues, etc., etc., but behind his back, they've been working like crazy. And the line about, you know, the de facto in the lodge is a line of sheer brilliance, absolute brilliance. But the only really way to deal with it, I think, is just to say, get used to it. That's how Australians live.
Yes?
Well, I have a couple of problems. One, Lenore, the question of his drink driving record was...
Some years before he and Gillard met, of course. She may have been a very sobering influence.
Thank you for answering, David. But what I was about to say was that when you have a partner with any sort of skeleton in the closet, and some, you know, in Australia, I guess a drink driving thing is generally sort of accepted or at some sort of a level. But if you're going to run for the highest office in the land, you generally try to get all this stuff right out there before any campaign. Now, I read that story this morning, and I noticed that this is only in 2003. This is not, you know, it's not a long ago thing, but he was 4 times over the limit, and he crashed his Alfa Romeo into somebody's carport. Now, this is actually quite a serious offence.
Yes,
So you may not think so.
No, of course it is.
But David, what they should have tried to do, what the opposition has done with this smear campaign, is say beforehand...
So the problem is
now, Tim's the first bloke. He's a guy who likes going to the boozer with his mates, and, well, on one occasion, maybe more.
So Piers, are you saying the problem is not so much that he had the drink driving conviction, but that the Labor Party didn't inoculate against it? That's your problem?
I'm saying that they should have been totally upfront and open about everything.
Well, in what way exactly does Tim Matheson's previous drink driving conviction impact on how Julie Gillard may do the job as Prime Minister if the Australian people elect her?
I think it comes down to her judgment.
What, that it's bad judgment to marry or be a de facto spouse of someone who once had a drink driving conviction? Seriously?
I think it comes down to her political judgment, that if when she ponied up for this position by chopping Kevin Rudd and had her first press conferences, rather than appearing in virginal white as if she had emerged from absolutely nowhere but the Labor Party machine with no track record,
you're right, Piers,
social or political, she should have said, I'm this girl from Adelaide via Altona, you know, with
She
four
did say
bears
she was
in
a
one.
girl from Adelaide
I'm
via
sorry?
Altona. She went
you
to
worried-
great
but
length about it.
But she
Are you worried
hasn't.
about the colour of her dress?
No,
Piers?
David. What
I
she
can't
hasn't
follow.
done, she's given a lot of interviews, and I went over them this week. She spent 5 hours on a photo shoot to make Women's Weekly look good, but she hasn't been upfront with the public about her life.
Okay, I think her life. Okay,
Her life.
I think you've had enough time to try and make the point. Lenore, on superannuation is apparently an announcement on the government's part today.
Yes, a policy. The government's policy announcement today is their response to the Cooper review into superannuation, where they will support that review's recommendation that superannuation providers have to provide a no-frills, low-fee account which would benefit someone who's 30 now by the end of their career by $40,000.